Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Driving at Home podcast. This is your host, Johnny Trokey, and this is the podcast where we talk about Chris's latest sermons and give you some practical action steps, maybe some bonus takeaways, maybe even some discussion questions for you and your family to help drive those lessons home for you guys. Today, we're talking water to wine. This is going to be fun. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Driving at Home podcast. So glad you're joining us again. We took a break for several weeks for personal but necessary reasons, but we are back, and that's the important thing. A couple of changes moving forward that you'll notice. If you're listening on YouTube, then you'll see that there's nothing to see. That this is an audio-only podcast. That's how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. It's just a much more sustainable format for me, who is the maker and producer of this podcast. I'm not a videographer. I found that out the hard way, and so I needed to scale back the amount of production time that this was taking from my weekly responsibilities. But I still wanted to produce a high-quality, valuable resource for you, for your families, to help drive home the lessons from Chris's Sunday sermons and add some bonus takeaways, some practical action steps, like I say every week. That's really important to me, and I wanted to be able to find a way to do that and do it week in, week out, sustainably, without pulling my hair out, which is hilarious because I don't have any hair. Anyway, today we're talking about water to wine, and I said in the introduction this is going to be fun. What do I mean by that? I mean we're talking about one of Jesus's miracles, and that's fun. That's like a fun topic for me because it's supernatural, it's awesome, it's spectacular, and particularly this miracle, I don't feel gets enough attention and isn't talked about enough. I know every Bible class teacher, every preacher, every minister in history has said that about every single topic that they discuss. They say it every time. Whatever their topic is the topic that doesn't get talked about enough. But this time, it's true. And it's true because I say it's true. We don't talk about this miracle enough because there's so much to learn from it. And it sort of gets overlooked by Jesus's miracles that are more grandiose, more magnificent, and more impactful by comparison. And it's okay to say that this miracle pales in comparison to some of Jesus's other miracles in terms of how grand it was and how impactful it was and how quote unquote big it was. Jesus literally raised people from the dead. He literally told people to walk that had not been able to walk ever before, and they were grown people. He performed some miracles that, like, you can't, you can't imagine turning water to wine, but you really can't imagine talking to a giant sea in the middle of a storm and just saying, hey, stop that, and it obeying you. Right? Even turning water into wine seems to be more conceivable than having the wind and the waves obey you. So it's okay to say that in comparison to some of Jesus' other miracles, turning water to wine does sort of pale in comparison, but that doesn't mean that this miracle is insignificant or unimportant. As a matter of fact, it's super important. It's the very first miracle Jesus performed. It sort of kicks off his ministry, and I think there's a really important lesson, in addition to the lessons that Chris taught us about on Sunday, that we can learn from this miracle. So let's jump into that. I think there's two things. Number one, this is a miracle that Jesus performed for somebody who didn't ask for it. Let me say that again. This is a miracle that Jesus performed for somebody who didn't ask for it. Now, there are some other miracles that meet this criteria, for sure. But I think it's interesting that it was requested, but it was requested on behalf of somebody else. So Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes to Jesus and says, hey, I know the master of the feast. We're running out of wine. It's a stressful situation. We need you to fix it. Mary asks for a miracle not for herself. It wasn't that Mary was so concerned like, hey, I really want some more wine and we're running out, so could you help me out? It wasn't that. It was somebody I care about is in a situation that is stressful. Can you help them out? And so that's the first thing, asking for the work of God in the life of somebody you care about. That's a lesson we can learn. Be like Mary. Look at the people around you in your life and say, how can Jesus help them in their life? How do they need Jesus in their life? And then pray and ask Jesus to do that work in their life. Ask for a miracle on behalf of somebody else. That's what Mary did. So that's number one extra lesson or bonus takeaway from this miracle. But the second thing is that this was not a life-changing, life-altering, or life-threatening situation. Don't get me wrong. Chris did a great job contextualizing the weight and importance of wedding feasts in that day and age. But think about it. Worst case scenario, what happens to the master of the feast, dude, if they do run out of wine? It's not like the wedding party is going to form an angry mob, take him out back, and beat him to death. That's not going to happen. He's not going to get stoned. He's not going to get hung. He's not going to be put to death. He's not going to get put in jail. He's not going to be stripped of his family. Okay? It's a big deal because it was something he was in charge of, and it was doomed to fail. But it wasn't like his life depended on it. Why is that important? Why is that important? Because sometimes I feel like we wait until something happens in our lives that is life-threatening, or we at least perceive it to be, that is so beyond stressful that it's going to alter the course of our life, that has to be the preconditions for any problem that I bring before Jesus. Like, your life had better depend on it, because Jesus has other things to do with his time than to worry about things that are not life-changing, life-altering, or life-threatening for you. And that's just not the case. If I came to you, just to put this in perspective, if I came to you and I told you, hey, I'm planning my wedding and I'm just really stressed out because we want there to be wine at the wedding, but we're going to have 100 people, and that's a lot of wine, and wine is expensive, and we're just starting out financially, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to have enough for everybody. And so I'm just asking God, God, please work a miracle so that we can have enough wine for our wedding. You'd be sitting there listening to me thinking, don't you think it's a little silly to expect that Jesus cares about something as insignificant as the quantity of alcohol at your event? Even if it's a big event and an important event in your life? Don't you think that's a little silly? Why would Jesus be concerned about that? But we see here, he was. For Mary and for the friend of the family, it wasn't too small for Jesus to get involved. And that's the second lesson I want you to take away, is that there's not a problem in your life that is too small to bring to Jesus. Philippians chapter 4 says to cast all your anxieties on him. What anxieties fit into the category of all anxieties? The answer is all anxieties. I know that sounds like a riddle, but it's not. It's pretty straightforward. So if there's something in your life that's bothering you, or if there's something in the life of a friend that's bothering them, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, something that would change the course of their life in order for you to bring it to Jesus. When somebody loves Jesus and they care about something, Jesus cares about that thing too. He made that really clear throughout his ministry. So bring it to Jesus. As far as discussion questions for you and your family, if you're listening to this as a family and you want some things to carry on a discussion, one of the things to think about is to ask each other who around us in our life is dealing with something big or small that they could use Jesus' help with. And then pray that Jesus would help and go to work in the lives of those people. Ask for a miracle. Ask for the work of God, the hand of God to work in the life of somebody around you. And don't wait for it to be some life-threatening or life-changing situation. Just anything where you feel like they need help, where they're stressed out about something. Bring it before Jesus That's one way to show love to somebody else. It's one way to ask God to glorify himself in the lives of people around you, and ultimately to show God to the people that you love and care about. God is still at work today, everybody. I want you to believe that. I want you to be certain of that, and I want you to live as though it's true, because it is. Jesus is alive and well. Praise him for that, and he is working in the world today. Believe it, act as though you believe it, and ask him to help the people around you that you love. We'll see you same time, same place next week here on the Driving It Home podcast.